All right, Taylor, let's take a look at your paper. Emily format first. This is correct. This is correct, except that this is the 17th of October that you turned your paper in. Way too much space here, so you got to fix that. Mental instability is not the greatest style in the world either. I can tell just by floating down through your paper that your paragraphs are way too short, and obviously that makes sense because you only got through 2.5 pages, a little bit less than that. So I can tell you right now, one of the things that we need to work on with you is elongating your thoughts, writing longer sentences, organization a little bit, and I'll go through some of those things first. Okay, so you start off with the quote, whether he thinks he sees the dagger, which is a pretty popular quote in this assignment. You got space issues here, so add a space. What I'd love to see right after that is you to explain that this is a quote from Macbeth by William Shakespeare, which you spelled Shakespeare wrong, and explain what the quote is about. Okay, explain what the situation is, etc., and then lead it into the idea that Macbeth at the time was suffering from a disorder known as post-traumatic stress disorder. This came about because of his time in the war, blah, 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 and he carried many symptoms of it, and those symptoms include this, 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 and this. And then you're going to jump down into a thesis statement. This is not a thesis statement. This is a bunch of plot points. His symptoms led him to the invasion of his kingdom, his death, Lady Macbeth's death, and Banquo's death. Okay, so death, 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 and invasion. That's not a thesis statement. That's just plot. So try to figure out a way to make this paragraph flow like that. That you're going to tension getter, explain it, tie it into your topic, introduce your main points, come up with a really solid thesis statement. So that's what your introduction should look like when everything is said and done. Alright, let's jump down to your first body paragraph. Alright, so you start off with the symptom that he has. I need to see some in-text citation because I'm pretty sure you just didn't know this off the top of your head. You can't use you or yourself in the paper, so you're going to lose a point under voice for that. You got a run-on sentence here. He states, comma, blah, blah, blah. Macbeth has doubts before killing Duncan because at first he cares, then he realized he didn't care at all about anything at all after he killed Banquo. So how do we get from Duncan in the beginning part of the sentence to Banquo at the end of the sentence? I'm not exactly sure how, but you went there. And this is what I'm talking about, Tayla. Separate your thoughts, make them more organized as you plot out even your paragraph should have a little bit of, pre-writing to it, that you know what you're going to say and why you're going to say it. So as you form this body paragraph, come back and look at some of these things and see how it's supposed to be formed. Because your first symptom here, negative changes in thinking and mood. So how does he really change the way he thinks about people and his mood? Because the first quote you bring up is from way at the end of the story. This is actually as Act 3, Scene 4. So we're almost past the middle part of the story when you're seeing this. I would think if you're talking about changing mood, it'd be from the beginning to the end. So how does he change from the beginning to the end? I think that's where you'd want to attack. But again, this sentence doesn't make sense because it's all over the place. He shows no sympathy, for he does not care. This is used as a conjunction, so comma conjunction, because you have two complete sentences there. And then you say he does care a great deal about his leadership as king, even though he knowing he will lose it all very soon. So go back and clean that up. After Duncan's death, all he cared about was being in power. Here's a run-on sentence. Due to PTSD, comma, his negative outlook changed his reactions for almost everything in his life. Okay, but you say that sentence, and then you don't really talk too much about it. Yes, he changes, his feelings about Lady Macbeth changed, but why? You didn't really talk about that. Yes, his feelings for killing Duncan changed, but why? You didn't really talk about that. Why do things change? And to know that, I need to know more about negative changes in thinking and mood when it comes to PTSD. What do the experts say about it? And why does that make sense for Macbeth? So we need to see more of that in there. I think what you're trying to do is have a transition into the next paragraph, because it's talking about change the reactions for almost everything. then you talk about his emotional reactions changing. I see what you're trying to do there. Just be more specific. And when I say in your body paragraphs that you need a little bit more focus, I definitely see where. So hopefully as I go through this paragraph, you'll start to see why. All right, so emotional reactions and how they're altered. Again, there's no outside source. I don't know what the experts say about emotional reactions, so I'm having a hard time figuring out where your paper should go, because this is literally all over the place. So you're talking about Lady Macbeth and how he finally gets to wear the pants. How does that have to do anything with emotional reactions? Then you jump into how he's always going to be on guard because he can't sleep. And then you jump into he doesn't have time to pay attention to his wife because he's always on guard for danger. And then you talk about how he's got blood on his hands, which led into intrusive memories, which is this is your transitional statement. Which I'm really glad that you're using transitional statements, Tayla, because a lot of people aren't. But I don't know where you're trying to go with this. There's no quotes from the story, and there's no quotes from the story in the next paragraph as well. So there's no quotes from the story, from the play. There's no quotes from any outside source. You're just kind of randomly listing some things that happened without actually talking about them. You have some silly mistakes here that you need to look at. You have some really awkward wording here that you need to look at. You have a sentence fragment here that you need to look at. I don't know. It's just this paragraph is all over the place. And I look at this paragraph and go, geez Louise, how short is this? I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences only. And you should be writing at least 7-sentence paragraphs as a senior. Love to see, again, stronger topic sentences that actually act like mini thesis statements. You get into basically the same problems you had last time with the last paragraph. Brings back harsh memories. How does the dagger bring back harsh memories since he hasn't killed anybody yet? Is that a mention to maybe past wars? I don't know. He does not sleep. How is that harsh memories? This is a run-on sentence, but also the second part of the sentence, I don't think you can even back up. What do you mean he doesn't want to dream of it and have nightmares? Show me the line in the play where he says, I don't want to fall back asleep because I'm going to dream of something. And then he sees the ghost of Banquo. How is that harsh memories? So you don't explain anything. You don't elaborate on anything. It's just a bunch of random facts. All right, so avoidance, run-on sentence here, and I don't know. He believed he couldn't be killed because of his prophecy, which is true, but I don't know if that's trying to avoid his death. He's almost meeting death head on, like there's no way you can defeat me. I don't know. So go back and look at that. He avoids Macduff. This is a good example of avoidance. He really tries to avoid Macduff because he's scared that he will take all the power away from him. He just knows he's supposed to be afraid of him is all. That's all the witches told him. After killing his family, Macbeth knew that he would do anything to seek revenge on him. I don't know if he really does know that or not. And this is, how is this an example of avoidance? Because that's actually not avoidance, that's meeting him head on. He does feel like it's that. I agree with that, but how is that avoidance? Because he meets them head on. So go back and fix that paragraph as well. All right, so you start with your thesis statement restated. You go through all of the main points, which is fine. This is the part that's weak. So many people have tried doing this. We don't want to play the what if game. We don't want to know, oh, if only Macbeth wouldn't have had this, if only Macbeth would have got help, this would have changed. We don't want to play that game. So you want to get rid of that. Yeah, space issues here, use very here, and this is obviously a quote you got somewhere, so tell me this is plagiarism. If you're claiming this as your own words, where did you get this from? Okay, so go back and change that. You need a better clincher here at the end. Works cited page looks to be correct, except this needs to be tabbed in, so make sure that that is tabbed in. Otherwise everything looks good overall. All right, a few things to fix here, tayla, as we move forward. Much more streamlining, a lot more building on examples and elaborating on things. And obviously we want a little bit longer paper too, so you can elongate those thoughts. So looking forward to a rewrite.